Hi, my name is Reverend Dale Brown, and I get the great privilege and joy of being the pastor here at Community Church at Ocean Pines. We are a United Methodist congregation, a place that I thoroughly enjoy serving and being. This is my faith home, and it's because we serve a very good God, and I have some of the best people as church members. I invite you to participate if you would choose to do so. I'm joined today by a friend and colleague, Rabbi Rutberg, Rabbi Arthur Rutberg. And Rabbi, welcome. It's nice to have you here. We have been together off and on for meetings and events many times. And I want to compliment you and the congregation of Temple Bat Yam at the very start of our podcast. I was invited along with other local clergy to your installation, which was a fabulous service. I can't remember the gentleman, the rabbi that spoke, but he was very impressive. And I think his first name was David?
David Weiss.
Yeah, and he did a tremendous job. And we've come back for other events. Your congregation is always so warm and welcoming. Hospitality is a great reality. Thank you so much for having us and for welcoming us. It is so nice to have this kind of partnership existing here and knowing that there are places where we have a different understanding of life and faith, but we have so much more in common and so much more that we share. I will tell you this, I enjoy going to the temple.
Okay.
And I feel that worship there is real worship, even though my Hebrew almost got me kicked out of seminary. But it's a real pleasure to welcome you, and please relate to your people, your congregation, that I personally, and we've had some lay persons that went with me, that we really, really respect and appreciate your kindnesses to us. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Now, we were talking beforehand. I've always wondered why it was called, your congregation is called Temple Bat Yam. But you never have shared a business card with me because you said they were special. And so I've seen your business card, and it's daughter by the sea or daughter of the sea? Of the sea, okay. Right. And that shows you how bad my Hebrew is from seminary, but it's been 30 years. At any rate, welcome. Now, as a United Methodist pastor, I went through an educational process and an interview process to become an ordained pastor.
Right.
I've known many rabbis over my career, and how does one become a rabbi?
All right, great question. First of all, thank you for having me here.
Oh, you're welcome.
I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I want to learn more about this whole podcast world and hopefully get involved in it. The answer really kind of depends on the, I don't want to use denomination, but we'll say ideology.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In the Reform movement, which is what I'm part of, they will take, men or women who have completed college, so have to be a college graduate, and then you apply to rabbinical school, which for most Reform rabbis is the long name now, Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. Okay. They were once two separate entities, but in 1949 they came together. And their campuses are, they just had to close the one in Cincinnati, unfortunately. But the one in New York and Los Angeles and, of course, in Jerusalem are the main campuses. So, of course, once you apply, like in any school, they submit your information to the admission committee, and they look things over and decide forget this guy or let's look more into this person. And then they bring you in for an interview. And I suppose this may be true for other ministerial schools, but the interview process, I'm still traumatized. I'm joking, of course not. I still think about it because it was a situation where, I had no clue what was the right answer. And the fact is, there is no right answer. I mean, they want to see you and learn about you and understand.
They want to understand your process of thinking,
how you go, how you tick, what it's all about. It just so happened when I applied, the day of the interview, the dean couldn't be there. The dean was an interesting character. He was more a psychologist than a rabbi. And so I go through the interview meeting, and things seem to go well. 2 weeks later, I get a letter, and that's the office of the dean. I go, oh, all right, yeah. Then I find out, no, the dean wants to meet with me privately. I go, oh God, what do I do? And I was more nervous than I've ever been, at this meeting. And again, I had no clue where he was going, what he's doing. He asked me, so tell me, Arthur, why do you think you're here? And I said, well, I think because the committee, looked favorably at my application, and you just wanted to, have a chance to talk with me. No, that's not it. I said, oh God. Anyhow, I survived the process, obviously, and I did eventually get into rabbinical school.
Okay. So the dean looked favorably.
The dean looked favorably at me.
Okay. All right.
I lucked out, I suppose. So typical program is the first, ever since 1970, the first year you're spent is going to be at the college campus in Jerusalem.
Okay.
Or rather, a very intense, immersive Hebrew instruction. I mean, I came there, luckily having a pretty good Hebrew background. Many of my colleagues really, had next to none.
Sure.
And they had to be in a really, really intense, summertime course, and during it was a lot to do.
Okay.
Once you complete that, then you come back to the States. Again, in my day, you spent the next 4 years either in New York or in Cincinnati. That's changed since then.
Right.
But I'm sure that part is still the same. So it's a 5-year program altogether.
All right.
During those years, for me, it was after the second year, we got a master's degree.
Okay.
For me, it was a master's degree in Hebrew literature.
Okay.
That probably
All
is still the same.
All right.
I don't know for sure.
So that'd be like an MA?
Yeah.
Okay.
MAHL.
Okay.
Fancy letters. And then once the course is finished, then you are ordained.
Okay.
Big ceremony. For us, it was done at the Grand Temple Emmanuel in Manhattan.
Okay.
If you've ever seen it, it's almost like a cathedral.
Okay.
Very impressive place.
Neat.
And you do your thing. You get the hands put on you. They bless you and give you a certificate. And you're good. You are now an ordained rabbi.
Okay.
Fit to serve. Really anywhere you want to. In my day, the predominant way was to go and serve a congregation. Nowadays, and I think to some degree this has to do with the larger influx of women who come in as rabbinical students. Many of them choose a whole variety of different ways, teaching positions, institutional positions, organizational positions. So the congregational position is not the only way to go these days.
I was just on a virtual retreat led by a female Jewish rabbi. She did a fabulous job. So I'm sure there's a variety of ministries in your tradition as there are in ours.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Although I must tell you that I think Jewish rabbi might be a redundancy.
Okay.
I think this rabbi
You
is
think so? Just
pretty
rabbi
good.
work? Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. That works for me too. So keep going. So, you then went from rabbinical school to, did you serve a local congregation first? Or, because I think if my memory serves me, you were a military chaplain as well.
That actually came later.
Okay.
All right, I'll give you the history.
Okay.
So while being a student rabbi, they farm you out to these smaller congregations that
Okay.
can't afford a full-time rabbi, and you serve on a part-time, bi-weekly, or once a month kind of thing. I had 2 congregations. The first one was in Augusta, Maine,
Okay.
which I really enjoyed.
All right.
And the second one was up in Saratoga Springs, New
Okay.
York, where I met my wife, just coincidentally.
And you enjoy that the most, right?
Well, yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's the
yes.
right answer.
So once I was ordained, then, the world was open to you. Most of my classmates went to larger congregations where they served as assistants. So they would, learn their way under, another auspices.
Absolutely.
I was one of the few that didn't go that route. I went to a smaller congregation in Steubenville, Ohio.
Okay.
All right. My wife and I got married there, just so happens, and David Weiss, officiated at the wedding. Then we went from there to a whole nother world, to Brownsville, Texas.
Okay, that's a big change.
A huge change. Yeah, the southernmost, city in the contiguous United States. Very interesting congregation. We had members there who weren't really great in English, but they knew Spanish and Yiddish very well.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, reason being that in the 1920s, when the U.S. kind of closed the doors to immigration for Eastern European people, they went to South America. They came into Paraguay, Uruguay, Bolivia, wherever it was. Slowly made their way up
Through Mexico.
right? Got across the border. All right, we're good. We're in. Interesting place. So I served there for 6 years.
So you speak Spanish as well?
Yeah, somewhat.
Muy pequeño?
Muy poquito.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm one of those who can understand what's being said to me more than actually, responding.
I understand that too. I understand that as well.
Anyhow, so yeah, I learned a little Spanish. So then next thing, way back in my first year of rabbinical school, we had a rabbi, Barry Green was his name, come and speak to us about, being a chaplain in the military. And the idea always held some, interest to me in kind of the back of my head, thinking about, maybe someday. My wife thought it would be a really great thing to do, because it's a good life, it's a good profession, it's a good career. Plus, her sister and brother-in-law were actually in Europe. She thought, great, I'll get in and I'll get posted overseas. Be wonderful. So I pursued that, and luckily I was young enough to still get in, because 40 was, was the cutoff.
I understand.
And I was sent to, first to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey for my, for chaplain school training, and then to Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay.
And while there in Fort Benning, I was there for 4 years on active duty. While there, we got to know the members of the Jewish community. I actually helped teach at the religious school there.
Okay.
So, when I'll cut to the chase, when I was on orders to go to Germany. And it was would have been a huge position, The local congregation approached us and said, "Hey, our rabbi is leaving. Would you like to be our rabbi?" I went, "I don't know if I can."
Right.
Spoke to my commander, the chief chaplain. None of them were happy about it, but they said, "Well, yeah, technically you can, because as you're changing station, you're in like a window period, almost a limbo period, right? Not quite purgatory, but you get the idea.
Yeah, we don't have, we're Methodists.
That's right.
Good. So we're okay.
Yeah, okay. So I did it.
Wow,
I separated out, and I remained in the reserves for the next 6 years.
Okay.
But I went and served the congregation there in Columbus, Georgia.
Wow.
That lasted 4 years. And then I heard about a congregation that was starting up down in Florida.
Okay.
Applied there, and they went, "Yeah, sure." So that was for a year. I was in Bradenton, Florida.
Okay. Familiar with that location.
Right. And then I saw on the listing that Port St. Lucie, Florida was open. I thought, well, the Mets play there, can't be that bad.
Well, we'll talk about that later.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm letting my
You're letting your New York background.
My New York come through, yeah.
Yeah, we'll keep rooting for the Orioles.
No problem.
So you went to, we wrote.
If they don't win, that's a shame.
That's right.
So,
yes.
Yeah, and I was in Port St. Lucie for the next 15 years. It was a good-sized congregation. Most of my congregations had been slowly increasing from 100 families to 120 to almost 200 in Georgia, and then Florida was over 300.
Okay.
And it was a huge job, and it was a great congregation. But for a variety of reasons, in 2015, I went elsewhere. And I actually went to the smallest congregation to ever possibly have a full-time rabbi in Northeast Tennessee.
Okay.
Located officially in Bristol.
Right. Familiar with Bristol as well?
Yeah. And then that lasted 6 years, and then I came here.
Now, my understanding of Bristol is it's both in Virginia and in Tennessee.
Yes.
And there's a wonderful lake there. Yeah.
Well, there's a great Geico commercial.
Oh, okay.
With a lizard standing on
the white line.
Right.
Yes.
In the middle of
I know
State Street.
Yes.
And we've been there. It's hysterical. you ask for a cab to pick you up. We're on the Tennessee side. Oh, okay, it's
Well, I
here.
went to college in the Shenandoah Valley
Oh.
in Harrisonburg, Virginia.
Okay.
So have familiarity with that, and been on mission trips to that part of the world, to Appalachia and things. I understand. It's amazing to me. Our system is very similar.
Okay.
We start off in very small churches, sometimes as associate pastors, and learn hopefully how to do what we're called to do. And then, as we are given time, move forward into larger settings and congregations, or into diverse ministries that we feel God might be calling us
Right.
to serve, as we're
Right,
gifted
understood.
and able. So, I appreciate you sharing that, because I had never heard that whole story. So other than being a Mets fan, it just makes me appreciate you all the more. And listen, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad, and I'm
Thank you.
sure
I'm glad
that
to be here.
your congregation at Temple Bat Yam is glad that you're here
I hope so.
as well.
I think so.
And like I said, they're great people. Let's shift just a little bit, if
Sure.
we can. As a Christian, I fully believe in the Jewish heritage of Jesus, that much of what Jesus taught and said and did grows out of his understanding and experience of the Old Testament.
Almost entirely, I
And I would be hard pressed to name anything that doesn't come out of that background. And certainly we understand the great value of the Old Testament in our tradition, and in even greater perhaps in your tradition as well. I understand too that we often think of Jewish persons as monolithic, and there's a variety of expressions of
course there
Jewish
is.
faith. So can you tell us, you talk about reform,
Right.
and that's your tradition within Judaism, but
Correct.
what are some other?
Well, typically speaking, the three main, branches or groups,
Okay.
people will say would be the Reform, which was the more liberal,
Okay.
conservative, and I don't mean liberal politically.
Right.
I mean liberal as far as observance and
Right.
ritual behavior. Then it's a conservative, which is kind of a middle of the road thing, which is very tenuous existence, but that's who they are. And then you have the Orthodox,
Right.
but within Orthodox, that's sort of like an umbrella term, because that covers a whole levels of observance, to the point where they're almost in an Amish kind of way, totally exclusive and secluded unto themselves. That's where you get the Hasidic Jews. So within you have modern Orthodox,
Okay.
which can look and sound just like you and me. But Shabbat is very strictly observed,
Okay.
as well as it's kashrut. So they're not going to go out to lunch with you at the Chinese restaurant, for
Right.
example.
Right.
And then even more extreme,
Right.
more
Right.
more retreated, more secluded, until you get to the Hasidic level. Now, in recent days, a few others have kind of popped up. There's what's called, and I don't fully, totally get what they're all about. This one group called the Renewal Judaism.
Okay.
They're extremely liberal, but like the Reform, yet they have a real issue with Israel
Okay.
and Zionism, and why exactly, I don't know the answer there. I
Right.
couldn't really say.
Right.
And an offshoot of conservative Judaism that began, as a thought, as an ideology in the 30s,
Okay.
is known as Reconstructionist Judaism.
Okay.
You may have heard of them.
A little bit.
Their main guru was Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan, who was an amazing person, and he actually came from an Orthodox background, but really seemed to embrace this socialist form of Judaism,
Okay.
where he says, what matters is not God giving Torah to the people. What matters is the people creating their folkways, creating their traditions, and then ascribing them to God. So
okay.
God, in his concept, is an afterthought
Okay.
to a degree. It's a very unusual movement, and it remains pretty small. It's headquartered in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And in large cities, you'll find maybe one or two, Reconstructionist synagogues.
Okay. Okay.
They don't like the word synagogue, though. The first one that Mordecai Kaplan actually, founded was called the Society for the Advancement of Judaism.
Wow.
Isn't that a great term?
It's a wonderful term. It's a great term.
Yeah. That, in a nutshell, is essentially what we have in the Jewish spectrum. In this country, you may find other varieties elsewhere in the world. Like, for example, the Reform movement in this country kind of has a very distinct approach and very open ended. The idea is to find your own personal spiritual expression.
Okay, all right.
Yet when you go like to Israel or to Europe, it's much more, for want of a better word, traditional.
Okay.
And incorporates things that you actually think you're in a conservative synagogue.
Okay.
If you were there, yet they're still part of progressive Judaism.
So, Rabbi, what role does ethnicity play in some of these Jewish synagogues and temples? And are they driven by ethnicity as well?
You mean the various movements?
Yes.
No, not at all.
Not at all. Okay.
No.
So somebody would feel comfortable going from place to place to place.
Well, they would, if they're willing to. People grow up with their own traditions, right? And what they think is traditional is whatever they're used to.
Okay. Their language and culture.
The language, their culture, the ritual. So, for example, and I think Hebrew was probably the best, barometer here. In the Reform movement, thankfully, since the 1940s, has been, a bit more Hebrew brought in.
Okay.
But it still remained mostly, an English-speaking Jewish expression. By the 1970s, as the movement kind of embraced the idea of Israel and Zionism completely and established a campus in Jerusalem, you find a lot more Hebrew coming in, to the point where they had to do two major revisions of the prayer books, 1975, and then most recently Mishkan Tefillah. I think that was in 2007.
Okay, all right.
So a lot more Hebrew is now part of it. But still, if you then, took this person who's grown up in the Reform movement and, transported him or her to a conservative congregation, they might feel a little lost.
Okay.
Because there'll be a lot more Hebrew than what they're used to. And it'll be melodies that they're not used to.
Okay, all right.
Transport that person next to an Orthodox synagogue, they go like, what's going on here?
Yeah, they're lost.
They're totally lost because it's completely in Hebrew. And it's a totally, kind of a chaotic experience where everybody can pray at their own pace.
Right.
Whereas in the Reform, it was all about, decorum. We all speak at the same time. We stand up. We stand up and we sit down at the same time.
Yes.
Like that. In the Orthodox, it's not quite as...
More individually driven?
One could say that.
Yeah, all right.
Right.
Cool.
I mean, the rabbi's out there, he's leading a service.
Okay.
But the people can be at their own pace. Because there are many points where you're just praying, on your own.
Yeah. Interesting. Fascinating. I think it's one of the things that we as Christians, because we don't always understand well enough, is that we think that a person is Jewish and that means they're all identical.
Right.
Or vice versa. And it's not the case. We're all unique, wonderful expressions of a loving God.
That goes both ways, right?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
Our view of Christians and Christianity is what we know, what we think we know, or what we don't understand about the various denominations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the various, liberal versus conservative trends that they represent.
Absolutely.
Most Jews have no clue.
Well, and Christians too.
Right.
In the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So let's shift a little bit. Rabbi, if I were to ask you, what you think is the one or two greatest contributions of Judaism and the Old Testament and your tradition to the world are, what would you identify them? What are the gifts that you have given?
The Gifts of the
world?
Jews, right?
Yeah.
Great book.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Thomas Flannery.
Read that a long time
Thomas
ago.
Cahill,
Yeah.
Right. I suppose the number one would be what is often termed ethical monotheism.
Okay.
The concept, of course, that there is one God,
Right.
and that this God has sort of a plan, has a goal set for humanity.
Yeah, that you see that uniqueness in the Old Testament, and we did ancient Near Eastern studies when I was in seminary and college
Pritchard.
and things. Yeah, J.B. Pritchard, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's fine unless it's bothering you.
No, Ted's okay. He's all right. Ted and Molly are fine, so we're okay.
All right. So ethical monotheism is, again, like I said, the idea that there is one God, that this God has a direction that God expects us to follow, if you will, and that is the ethical, message of doing the right thing, you know, love your neighbor as yourself. What is hateful to you, do not do to any person. You know, and these are the same things that, you know, Judaism and Christianity both have as their core.
Absolutely.
You know, love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your might.
And love your neighbor.
And love your neighbor.
Absolutely.
Exactly, right. So I would say that first and foremost would be that. I believe that Torah, all its richness, all its teachings, on all levels of how to worship God and how to you know, honor God, and maybe more importantly, how to honor, you know, your fellow human being, and help take care of him, even, you know, his animal. Even if you hate the guy, but you see his animal, his donkey, you know, walking down the road, you know, kind of limping in distress, it's obligatory for you to help him.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, don't allow any body or any animal or human to suffer any pain, regardless of who they are, where they come from, regardless of how you might feel about them. Still, it's your job.
There's a relational responsibility.
Right.
That's there.
Exactly.
Now, I heard, and I don't know if this is true, you can certainly correct me if I misspeak, that there is a statement that has its heritage in Judaism that says, if you have helped one person, you have helped the whole race, the whole world. Is that, am I close even in that kind of thinking?
You're close. Schindler's List, if you ever saw the movie.
Yeah, I did.
Really broadcast that beautifully. It comes from the Talmud, from the tractate known as Sanhedrin, which is, of course, all about justice. And the story is that since all of humanity derived from one person, i.e. Mr. Adam,
right?
I'll give him Mr. Why not, you know?
Yeah. You understand.
The racist status. Therefore, when you help one person, it is as if you have helped an entire world.
Yeah.
When you save one person, it's as if you save
So
the entire world.
So our
Vice versa.
responsibility,
Killing
our
one
ethical
person.
responsibility, is towards, as we in Christianity understand, neighbor being everyone and anyone that we meet.
Absolutely. Right.
And you know, one of the things that I admire about you and admire about Judaism, Jewish thought, is the concept of shalom. And I know that, you know, as we work together in our interfaith ministerium group, which has, you know, a Presbyterian and Episcopal representation and Anglican representation, you're always very concerned about the concept, the understanding of peace. So help us as Christians, as persons who are listening, understand what shalom is really about.
All right, that's a great question. Shalom comes from the word shalem, which means whole or complete. And I think this connects back to one of the Kabbalistic understandings of creation. That creation is not complete unless we do our part. I'm going to throw in a bunch of terms here.
Okay.
The term is tikkun olam, to fix the world or repair the world, one can say. So in the Kabbalistic understanding, the world was completed, but there were some issues that were not fully resolved. One of them being the presence of evil in the world.
Absolutely.
And so our job as human beings is to perform the commandments, the obligations that God requires of us, to perform them in such a way that they lead to other people also doing them. And in so doing, we help to release the light that God has sown into the earth. I know I'm talking weird stuff now.
No, that's fine. I understand what you're saying.
And complete the process of creation. Once the world is complete, then it's at peace.
So we're actually completing the creation process that God has begun?
Correct.
That's a wonderful concept.
Correct, right.
That's an absolutely beautiful concept, I think. And thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that, because, you know, shalom for us is often a word that we hear, but it means wholeness and a peace that is not just for us, but for the entire world and the world itself.
Right.
And all its peoples.
Shalom is not shalom unless everybody is included in it.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that's a tremendous, and it's a great thought. So, two things. One is, thank you for being here. I think this is a rich conversation. I mean, I'm learning a lot from you and from my experiences of being at Temple Bat Yam. And thank you for that privilege and that opportunity. And we'd love to have you come back if you're willing to talk some more about stuff like this.
Talking is what I do. So
yeah, I understand that job too. You know, and I want to cover a couple things before we close out. Rabbi, one of the sad realities of our broken world is anti-Semitism. And that we judge a whole people, and we often take out our anger or our blame on persons who are different than us. Mm-hmm. And it's a human problem.
Very true.
So how can we, as persons of faith in both communities, work together to maybe, you know, and I'm watching on the news, and it seems that anti-Semitism is rising, that it's increasing. How can we work together to combat that evil, that horrible reality of our day?
Two avenues come to mind. One is what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And everything that you and I and our whole Interfaith Friendship Association does, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. showing the presence of ministers of all different faiths working together mm-hmm. for a common goal, for a common good of helping out the community. Mm-hmm. Showing that, you know, we're all together in this process, mm-hmm. and as many have said, and I always say, that there's far more that unites us than divides us. Absolutely. So that's I guess, you know, by modeling, you know, mm-hmm. by role modeling, teaching by example. And secondly, I think we need to actually be teaching. Because, number one, many people do not understand Judaism.
Correct.
I mean, again, people are naturally xenophobic.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand what's strange to them, and therefore they think it's a threat, something that's other.
Well, people see caricatures, or they create caricatures of persons, you know,
right.
and want to blame
right.
others for things that happen in their lives in ways that seem hurtful or bad, and we don't know each other.
Right.
That's an important part.
So, I mean, the caricatures are formed because you are only being given like one source of information, which is obviously
mm-hmm.
very tainted and very incorrect.
Absolutely.
Right. So, if we fully understood, or better understood, I should say, Judaism, the Jewish people, if we better understood what anti-Semitism is, mm-hmm. I don't think people understand that, you know, for want of a better term, hatred of the Jew has been going on for more than 2,000 years. I mean, the first record of it was when the Greek Empire was trying to conquer mm-hmm. The territory, which is now, of course, the land of Israel there. Mm-hmm. So that goes back to, 200 BC. So it's not a Christian issue. It's not a racial issue.
It's a human issue.
It's not an economic issue, not a social issue. It's a human issue. And each generation that comes along, sadly, has found new ways to justify it, mm-hmm. or new ways to act it out. Mm-hmm. I mean, these days, one of the most common ways is extreme criticism of Israel, mm-hmm. Denying its right to exist and so on, which in many ways, it's like a thinly veiled anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. So people need to understand that it's been there for a long time, and unless we can be fully educated, we'll never, be able to get rid of it.
Right. For me, one of the most life-changing experiences that highlighted this reality to me was that many years ago, my son said to me, "Dad, I want to go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C." Mm-hmm. And I really honestly did not want to go. I didn't, because I knew from my study of history, and I knew enough as a person, that this was just it's a horrific reality.
Absolutely. But the point is, it's a reality.
Yeah, and it's and you can't deny that. Historically, it's a fact.
Right.
And we went. And Rabbi, I have to tell you that I'm glad I went. And I the understanding of how evil people can be towards other people just based on who they are, it has stayed with me all these years. Mm-hmm. And that's probably 20 or more years ago. Mm-hmm. that we went. And I think this is a great concern, in the same way that we deal with other issues of race based on ethnicity and background, and the fact that all of us need to find a way to overcome these divisions. And I'm thankful that I went. And even as I talk with you now about it, the power of just being in the presence of what seemingly was so drastically evil is overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
In our world to bring
sure
healing about that. Now, I want two things in closing that are much lighter than that and very different.
Okay.
First of all, your congregation and my congregation are coming together here. We're inviting for an ice cream social. And I'm so thrilled that you told me that all flavors of ice cream are kosher.
Absolutely.
And so on the 21st at 4 o'clock, we are thrilled to invite your congregation and yourself and your wife and everyone to our church for just a time of getting to know one another. I'm convinced that one of the things that helps us to understand each other is to get to know each other by name. And then when we see each other in the grocery store or wherever we might see one another, we can say, "Oh, that's not the rabbi. That's Art. That's whomever it might be that we see from one another,"
right.
and become friends based on getting to know each other and see each other. And I think that's important. So I'm thrilled that you're coming. And what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? So what should I make sure I have on hand?
I really like coffee ice cream.
Do you? I knew you were going to say that. Because you just had that cup of coffee, so I knew
So
you
it's
were
on my
going to
head,
say
right?
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I understand that. So at any rate, that's one thing. But we're celebrating. Both of us are celebrating anniversaries.
That's correct.
We're having our 40th anniversary here at Community Church on September 18th with a 10 o'clock service. And I want you to know that you're certainly personally invited by me to come. Our bishop will be here, our superintendent will be here. Our bishop's coming the week before. And so, we would love to have you and persons from Temple Bayat come. But you also are celebrating an anniversary. So tell us about that.
It's the 25th anniversary of the building of Temple Badiam.
Okay.
And we're using it as an opportunity to raise funds to do a lot of refurbishing in the temple. And the big gala party, the anniversary splash, I like to call it.
Okay.
Is going to be on October the 8th, Saturday, October the 8th at 6 p.m. And it's, I'm pausing here because I don't know quite how to phrase this. It will be at the restaurant in Ocean City called Blue, B-L-U, which is owned and run by a member of our congregation. And they've just done a big expansion project on the building itself. So it should be a nice new facility that we're going to be in.
That's wonderful. Sounds great.
It should be great.
Sounds great.
And we invite everyone to come and join us. We'll be putting up, flyers and so on and so forth very shortly. Also, I should mention, on August the 10th at the temple, which is a week from today, oh God, and I don't want to quote the wrong time. I believe it's 7 p.m.
Okay.
We're having a chamber music concert.
That's right.
It's I should have brought my material here.
That's all right. But if they were to call Temple Bat Yam,
yes,
they could get information.
Absolutely.
To find out about that. And my hope is that I will be there on that day because I like chamber music and enjoy as I've said, enjoy your congregation, and your folks are tremendous people. They're wonderful people.
They are.
Now, I also want to mention to you in closing that what's unique about this whole reality is you're celebrating the building of your building 25 years ago. Earlier this summer, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the building of our sanctuary.
Oh.
We've been here 40 years, but the sanctuary that we worship in on Sunday mornings is the same age as Temple Bat Yam.
Wow.
So a lot of things in common. Friend, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I enjoy your presence. I enjoy the partnership that we have in the Interfaith Ministerium. I value that. And you know, again, thank you to you and to Temple Bat Yam for all the wonderful things you do in the community. It is a true joy, friend.
Thank you.
To have you here.
My pleasure.
Blessings to you, and
Likewise.
Ted,
Thank you.
we're going to turn it over to you for whatever editing you need to do.